नमस्कार. ओम अग्निमीळे पुरोहितं यज्ञस्य देवमृत्विजं होतारं रत्नधातमम्. This is the beginning of what I'm going to talk today about, and that is our RigVeda. I purposely have kept the name as our RigVeda for the simplest reason that we all, I mean, whichever religion, whichever country, or whichever culture you belong to, we all feel that Rigveda is not for me. In fact, none of the Vedas are for me. They are away, they are distant, that is something which I will not understand. But on the contrary, Vedas, and especially Rigveda, is such a beautiful poem book, that now you will know what I mean. Veda, as you all know, is knowledge, right? That from the same verb, we also get Vida is to know, and we also get the word Vidya. And similarly, we get the name Veda. And Ruk is Ruk Archanat. Archana is puja, worship, we know that. And when you want to worship a deity, by the way, in Rigveda, we don't talk about gods and goddesses, we talk about the deities. We don't talk about Deva and Devi, we talk about Devata. Okay? So, when you worship a deity with a mantra, that mantra is called Ruk. And when many such mantras were collected together, edited, we are going to see how it was done. That is the time the text called RigVeda came into being. Now, we know that Aryans settled in the fertile land of Sindhu, Ganga, Yamuna, Satluj, all these Panchapa, Panchapa, that is Punjab, and Vipat, Shatudri, I mean, Bia, Satluj, all these names are mentioned in Rigveda. So, and of course, Sindhu and Ganga, but these names come there, and when they settled, before that they were nomadic, they went from one place to another after some time. When you settle, you start doing agriculture. When you start doing agriculture, the society is financially and culturally stable. And when you are culturally stable, then you start looking out for something more than that. For example, then you start appreciating the rising sun in the sky, or you start appreciating the Senapati, the commander in chief of the army who helps you in winning the wars, or the medicine men who help you when you are not well. All these things you start noticing. And then this Vedic Rishis, as they are called, they started composing ruks. I'm not going to use the words which are typically translated into English, that like Sukta is translated as hymn, but I am not very comfortable with that word, and I think I'm going to use the word Sukta. Now, what happened is, let's say, for example, Madhuchandas Vaishwamitra. This is the name of the Rishi, which means Madhuchandas is his first name, and Vaishwamitra obviously gives reference to his Gotra family, right? So when he composed the first verse, in the sense, he composed a particular mantra, Agni Mile Purohitam, which I recited for you just now. He composed many other mantras also addressed to the rising sun. The rising sun is called Savitru in Vedic language. So there were, say, 9 mantras composed by him addressed all to Savitru Devata. Now they all come together, they are all collected together, and that forms a poem, or that forms what the Vedic Rishis would like to call Sukta. The word Sukta is beautiful. Su plus Ukta. Ukta, it's spoken, well spoken. Just as in letters, Sanskrit classical literature, you have Subhashita. Similarly, in Rigveda, we have Sukta, similar sounding, similar word, but of a very different level. So, in the society, there were many such mantras, many such ruks which were rampant, and many rishis also. For example, I told you about Savitru. See, all these people, I will not go into the controversies of the details of time of RigVeda, when RigVeda was composed. But please remember that it was composed at least 5,000 years back, at least. Maybe even mm, beyond that. I mean, it's difficult to say. Okay? So, when it was, and they always stayed in the north, right? There is no reference to the area south of India in Rigveda. So, in the north, in those days, 5,000 years ago, it was so cold, and so rising sun was important because it gave them light, it gave them heat, it gave them heat to cook their food, and it also help them in many other ways. It is preraka. Preraka in the sense it impels you to work. See, even today, in spite of all this electricity and all, at evening times or night, we are kind of low in our spirits. But let the morning sun rise and we are happy. And even before the morning sun comes Usha, the dawn, right? And Usha, actually, it kind of introduces the arrival of sun. And the rishis love Usha. Okay, so much so that they consider and describe her as a beautiful maiden, a young woman. And the rishis vie with each other, they compete with each other to describe Usha in a better and better way. Somebody describes her as Nruturiva, like a dancing woman. That just as a dancing woman would go from one end to other, she on the stage, even she does that. She is as beautiful. She looks as beautiful as a bathing woman. There are so many references to Usha. At the same time, there is reference to Parjanya, which is rain, of course. I mean, Ratri, which is night. So, all the natural phenomenon are there, which were deified, which became devatas for all these people. Now, just see one more thing. When Aryans were settling here, there were obviously some fights, either amongst themselves or with the other people who were staying there. And in these fights, which then later on turned to battles and wars also, they needed a commander in chief. I'll purposely use the word Senapati because that is how he is known to us. His name is, yes, you know that. His name is Indra. So Indra was a Senapati. Indra, being a Devata, has come straight out of hero worship. You praise somebody as a hero, and then later on it becomes a devata, right? Just as first we praise Shivaji Maharaj as a hero, and now it has almost reached the level of being devata. Similarly, this also happened. So, and Indra is a person, right? So they describe Indra not the way they would describe Usha or Savitru or Parjanya. They described him as tall, broad shouldered, Sushipra, that is whose chin is very nice, Hiranya Keshi. Hiranya, gold, and Kesha is hair, the one who has golden hair. So just imagine, in those days, maybe even these people had gold hair, blondes. Okay? Anyway, so Indra is a person and they talk to him. They offer him somarasa. You all know what is somarasa. So it's an intoxicating drink used in those days. So they offer it to him, they share it with him, he talks to them, they praise him in what is called ballads, povada in Marathi. Because in povada, the last line is repeated. It is called a refrain. For example, Somasya Tamada Indrashchakara. This line will be there in all the 12 verses, in all the 12 ruchas of that particular sutta. So Indra is there. The society was happy. The society was prospering. But at the same time, people were getting old, people were getting sick, they needed medicine, there were disasters, tragedies, and they had to call someone for help. We know them too, whom they called for help. Later on, these two medicine men of Vedic religion are called Ashwini Kumar, as if one's name is Ashwini and the other one is Kumara. It's not that. In RigVeda, they are rightly called Ashwinam, that is two horse riders. Those who ride on horse are called Ashwinam. Now, these Ashwinas would not only dispense medicine to sick men. There are references, somebody couldn't see, so they gave him some medicine so that he could start seeing. A Vadrimati, a woman, could not conceive, so they gave him some medicine, and then she had a son called Suhasta. So there are some references. But the best reference, which I do want to tell you in detail, is that apparently, this is all given in RigVeda, okay? This is not a word or a letter is from me. Namulam likhyate kinchit. Whatever is there in the text, only that I am going to tell you. So apparently there was a war, and one of the fighters was Raja Khela. He had Vishpala. Now I'm saying he had Vishpala because according to some it was his queen, but mostly we don't think so. And we think that Vishpala was the horse on which he was riding. And you know that these people, the fighters, the kings, they love their horses. We know of Chetak, we know of Rani Lakshmibai's horse. So these horses are very dear to them. And RigVeda tells you that just as a feather of a bird would fall down from the sky, one of the legs fell down of this horse. Probably she was a mare. And what did Ashwinav did? Sadyo jangam ayasim pratyadattam. Sadya, immediately, ayasi janga. You know the word janga. And ayasi is made from steel. So they immediately gave her an iron janga. I don't know what they meant, but I have a different explanation for that. I don't think there was an artificial limb center in those days. We need not go to that tall a level, but probably that was the time when Ashwinav started nailing the shoe horse, which is called nal in Marathi and Indian languages, to the horse. So probably she sprained her leg and Ashwinav did that. Okay, so just imagine, apart from medicine, even other sciences are so important there. In fact, one person, Bhujju, his ship was drowning in the sea. I don't know how, but he he sent an SOS to Ashwinav. Ashwinav took boats which had Shataritram, 100 oars. So just imagine. They had wings and they were Atmanvat. They were alive. That is, they could move on their own. Now, this is just the description I want to bring to you. You are free to interpret it the way you want, but there certainly was something very different from what we now know of nouns or boats, right? And then they saved him, which is, by the way, they took 8 days and 9 nights to reach Bhuj. So just imagine, he was in the mid sea, but they somehow saved him. So they also praised, Rishis also praised Ashwinav. And there were many other smaller deities too. Okay, these were the main deities. I can't go into details of everything, But these are the main deities, main devata, and rishis wrote that. Rishis wrote prayers or laudatory verses or praise in praise of these devatas. Now, apart from this, there were philosophical hymn suktas too. Okay, I said that RigVeda is a beautiful work of poems, but even philosophy can be a part of poem. And by philosophy, we always mean something else. Philo is not love, and Sophia is the goddess of knowledge. And therefore, philosophy is love for knowledge. So, in whichever subject you take the doctorate, you will be always called a PhD because you are a doctorate in philosophy you have, and if you do your doctorate in Sanskrit, even then you would be given the title PhD. Okay, anyway, so what is this philosophy aims at? Most of the times, all philosophy and sometimes even pure science aim at the creation of the universe. Right? You would agree with me that whether it was Newton or Einstein or Oppenheimer or our Vedic rishis or Upanishadic philosophers, they always wanted to know how this universe was created. In RigVeda, we have so many suktas, which describe that. Everybody has his own theory, right? And which are these theories? You know the famous Purusha Sukta, Sahasrakshas, Sahasrapad, and all those things. Sabhumin Vishwato Vrutva Atyatishthad Dashangulam. He contained all the earth and still he remained beyond that. This is what we call Ananta. This is what we call infinite, right? There is no end to that. Somebody said, no, no, no. There was a Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha Samavartatagare. There was a bright garbha, that is embryo, in the sense, an astronomical uh, thing, in the very shining and bright, and then it broke. Big Bang Theory, it broke, and all the stars and some of the planets were. They don't say it in such a scientific way, but they aim at that. But the best sukta about creation is Nasadiya Sukta. Na sadasit, no sad asit tadanim. This is how it begins. And try to understand the idea. In spite of all my studies for last 50 years, I have not understood this idea that there was neither existence nor non-existence. Sat, asat, there was absolutely nothing. So what was it? Later on came Sadilameva Gullam. Then there came water. From that water, from that energy, some particles were formed. Even today, Stephen Hawking says the same thing, that it is from energy that gold particle was formed and all those things. And not in RigVeda, but later on in Puranas, that the idea of Dashavatara, Matsya Kurma, etc., they are exactly parallel to Darwin's theory of evolution. And they were, the Shavataras come way before Darwin. So our ancestors knew a lot of things. The only thing is, they did not write textbooks of science, right? They tried to tell you in different forms, and it is our duty to develop that vision and to understand it. Just as you have, there are many other philosophical hymns, but I must tell you other suktas also. There are suktas which are called Samwada Suktas. Okay. Now, what is Samvada? Dialogues. These are suktas. They are like staged dramas, or plays. Like Vishwamitra and two rivers, Vipat and Shutudri, they talk to each other. He says, why don't you take your water down? I want to cross. They said, what would you give me if we do that? I mean, this is a beautiful dialogue, spoken Sanskrit language, easy to understand, and it is obvious that they must have, such Samwada Suktas must have been staged. And the narrator would give you the background, which changes, that might be prose, which changes. There is Pururava, Urvashi Samvad, Yama, Yami Samvad. There are 20 odd such Samvad. What is very important is from these Samvada Suktas later on developed what became the Meru Mani of classical Sanskrit literature, that is Sanskrita Natakam. Okay, so these are also important. There are some suktas. I told you that there were rishis who composed many such ruchas and suktas and this and that. A stage, there was one very funny. In spite of all the scientific advancement, philosophical advancement, and everything, the script was yet to be developed. So everything was heard and retained in memory. If you remember, we always call Vedas as Shruti. Shruti is that which is heard. And therefore, even today, in India, when a person is well educated, we don't say, oh, he is a well read man. We say, ये तो बहुश्रुत है ना? So this is how Vedic things have remained in our language even today. Anyway, there were many suktas, and all these suktas, some people knew some, others knew a few, somebody knew some other, and there had to be some system. You had to edit them, put them together. How do you curate them also? How do you do that? Many attempts were made to do this. Not only one, but many. And some of the things are available at least in reference. For example, there was Aitareya, Shankhayana, Bashkala, Shakala, and all those people who tried to make a book, edited book of these ruchas. Excuse me. Out of these, Shakala's attempt was the best. And by the famous rule, survival of the fittest, it is Shakala Samhita which we use today. Now just imagine what Shakala did. Remember, there is nothing written. Remember, there is no card system. There are no computers to do alphabetization. There are no computers to do categorization. So Shakala and probably his editing team, they collected and chose the best ruchas. Then they put them in suktas. I told you what is a sukta. When one particular rishi writes some ruchas in praise of one devata, it becomes a poem that is called sukta, right? And so in these suktas, they chose 1028 suktas. Can you imagine that? Doing all this on conceptual level? I mean, it's difficult. We have printed books, but every time I have to see the contents. Where is that story? Where is that Yajnavalkya Maitreyi Samvad? And all such things, unless I see the content, I can't. But these people, they just knew. And not only that, they divided these 1028 suktas in 10 mandala. Mandala literally means branches. Okay, so 10 chapters, let's say. The first chapter and the 10th chapter is miscellaneous. What do I mean by miscellaneous? The suktas could be written by anybody, first by Madhuchandas, second by Vasishtha, third by Apala, whatever it could be. And also, the subject could be anything. Okay, so, but to keep some symmetry and design, Shakala did a wonderful trick. The first and 10th mandala each has only 191 suktas each, just to show that this is the beginning and this is the end. Some similarity. Second to seven mandalas are called Gotra mandala. Gotra is family. So if you take a second mandala, for example, it is Grutsamada, which means all the suktas which were composed by Grutsamada, you will find them in second mandala. So this becomes a Kavya Sangraha, okay, of Grutsamada. Or Vishwamitra is third. Third mandala. If I want to find a sukta, I'm looking for a sukta by Vasishtha, I have to go to seventh mandala. So Grutsamada, Vishwamitra, Bharadwaja, Atri, Vasishtha, these are all the Gotras, and the mandalas are, just imagine what a great job this must have been. Not job, it's a task, and they did it successfully. Eighth mandala is also kind of a Gotra mandala, Kanva and Angirasa, but for some reason, it is not called a Gotra mandala. And ninth mandala, the Rushi doesn't matter, the subject matters. And by then, Yajna Samstha, the Institute of Yajna, was becoming more advanced and complicated. And Somarasa was offered. And this Somarasa, as you know, that it was pound with water, and then it was strained. When you strain them, it is called Pavamana, and therefore the ninth mandala has all the suttas which are addressed to Pavamana Som. Okay, so now just imagine how Shakala must have done that. It's amazing. The other shakhas, we don't know anything at all because we don't have the text, we don't have them, it's not available. But Bhaskara Samhitas, on every Samskrita Dina, we say what is called Brahma Yajna. Okay, we in the sense Sanskrit lovers. And in this Brahma Yajna, there is a first mantra of every, not mantra, a part of it, of all the important texts. So we have Agni Mile Purohitam, which you know is RigVeda, Shakala Samhita. Then we have another mantra which comes from RigVeda Samhita, edited by Bhaskara. And now just see, this word Bhaskara is known and used even today in our languages. Because Bhaskara Samhita is not available at all. So if anybody starts talking too much about something about which nothing is known, then we say, I would use Marathi here, Kai Bhaskar Badbad Kartoy. So this is how the Rigvedic culture, the Rigvedic language is still deep rooted in our blood. Every time people say Gayatri Mantra, nowadays many people say Gayatri Mantra, they do chanting and Patha and this and that. None of them knows that Gayatri Mantra was composed by Vishwamitra Kaushika, and it comes in the third mandala of RigVeda. So if I ask you, do you know any mantra from RigVeda? Hence on forward, you must say, yes, I do. I know Tatsavitur Varenyam. So these are some of the things, which RigVeda has given us. It gives us not only knowledge, information, philosophy, religion, but it also gives us a pride for our heritage. And that, according to me, is the most important thing. Before you keep Rigveda away and say, oh, this is not for me, at least try to understand what Rigveda is. How can you kick something away which you don't know what it is? Right? So don't do that, please. I mean, you won't, but don't let others also do that. There are a couple of things. Okay, I have time. There are a couple of things which I want to talk about. One of them is, I told you various names like Vishwamitra, Bharadwaja, Atri, Kavasha, Ilusha, this and that. But I must also tell you that there are 21 suktas which are composed by women: Indrani, Apala, Vishwavara, then Mudgalani, and there are, I'm surprised because people who think that Indian women never had any right to education, they should come and read this. They should know that unless and until these women were educated and formally and properly educated, they wouldn't have been able to compose such beautiful suktas. Not only that, Shakala and the society accepted them and put them in their Samhita, their text, itself is an honor to all these women. In fact, if you see the role and position of women in RigVeda, I will talk about it some other time, but it is amazing. It is really, what should I say? I'm jealous of them sometimes. They have done great work, they were honored, they were respected, and society really cared for them. I'm talking only about RigVeda, I'm not talking about the Puranic times and Smriti times at all. So forget about that. About Vedic religion, I'm talking. So, anyway, 21 suktas by women is itself a great, what should I say, reward for the respect society had for women and the way women proved themselves. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about something which is very different. I talked about culture, a bit of religion, a little bit of this and that. But remember, there is a society. And in society, I just now told you that women were respected. And the most important thing to respect a woman, to have her as a partner, not only as a male female, but as a husband and wife, a legally accepted, a socially accepted, and personally liked woman is a wife, right? We have so many references to Patni. You know that without a Patni, you cannot even perform a yajna. Remember Ramayana story? Rama didn't have Sita next to him, so he could not, and therefore he did something else. But forget about that. Patni is called Jaya. Why? Because she gives birth to the children. There is a wonderful Vivaha Sukta in the 10th Mandala. And this Vivaha Sukta, it describes the Vivaha of Surya with Soma. Okay? Now you would feel that Surya is maybe Surya's daughter, sun's daughter, and Soma is, we by far know that Soma is a Soma Rasa and all that. Absolutely no. Soma is Chandra, moon. We say Someshwara, or we say Somavara, which is moon day, right? So Soma is Chandra and Surya is the reflected light of Surya. And that reflected light falls on the moon, that is called their marriage, and it's such an astronomically beautiful description, and at the same time it gives you the ritual. You will be surprised, but there are some rites which are described there which we perform even today. The mantras from Vedic literature, like Grubhnamite Saubhagatvaya Hastam, are used even today in our our wedding rituals. So just imagine, there is a description of Varat, Barat, जिसे बोलते हैं. So there is a description of that. There is a description of making money, making merry, having fun, having parties and feasts. Then there is a description of Shamulya, the Vadhu. She weaves herself the Shela, as we call it, that is called Shamulya in RigVeda, and gives, later on she gives it away to somebody. So just imagine that when Vivaha becomes such an important thing, the family is together. When the family is together, the society becomes strong. And when the society becomes strong, the nation becomes stronger. Even today, we are facing it, the basic institution of marriage is kind of dwindling away. And therefore, there are so many problems in society. And that ultimately leads to other bad things also. So, Vivaha is very important. There are some beautiful things. The Pati, the husband says to the wife that, hey Patni, Samana Manaha Bhava. That we will stay together, we will have children, we will have money is all right, but our mind should be same. And this is something, the mantras from Saptapadi. What do we say? I mean, you may not remember now, it was long back. But Sakha Saptapadi Bhava Samam Anuvrata Bhava. The first word is Sakha, and Sakha is friend. The relation between a husband and wife has to be friendship. How many of us enjoy that even today? So just imagine what were the expectations of Vedic husband and wife from each other. And in those days, they would always say, Dashasyam putra nadhehi, may she have 10 sons. For the simplest reason, there used to be wars and diseases, and out of 10, maybe some will survive. But there is one wonderful Ruk there. It says, Patim ekadasham kuru. You will have 10 sons of your own, but make your husband the 11th son. And if when women will hear this sentence, they would realize that yes, husband is the, what should I say, the 11th son or child of every wife. We have to take care of him in so many ways. Anyway, so this wife, when she comes in, is called Samradni. Samradni Shvashure Bhava. Samradni Adhidevrushu. You become Samradni to your, words are used in Rigveda, uh, father-in-law, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and brother-in-law, joint family. Now, again, when I read Rigveda, I don't read only the translations. I'm not interested in translations. What I want to see is read between the lines. There is joint family, and we know the advantages of joint family, and these days we are experiencing the disadvantages of nuclear family, as one of my friends often says. He says, nuclear family can only have explosions, nuclear explosions. I mean, jokes apart, but there are these bad things also. Just like this, there is also an Antyeshti Sutta. Antya Ishti, the last yajna, when all our lives we have offered something or other, aj, rice, purodash, soma, to the Agni, and this is your last yajna, last Ishti, where you offer your body to Agni. What a beautiful concept, and what a hygienic concept also. Anyway, so in this Antyeshti Sutta, they tell you how to look at death. And what they say is, this is beautiful. They say it is okay if a yellow leaf falls down. What we don't want is dying out of turn. When young people die, that is sad. I mean, of course, there are rituals also, but I won't go into that because I have to talk about some other suktas also. And one of them, again, all these are from 10th Mandala. That is called Aksha Sukta, which by far and large my most favorite. This is composed by one Rishi called Kavasha Ailusha. Now, even though he is called Rishi, he is a gambler. Aksha, in fact, is the dice, okay, with which you gamble. And this sukta is so amazing, socially so intense. He has lost everything in gambling. Forget about money that he has already lost. He has lost his wife. He said, my wife was always kind to me, but my mother in law took her away, which is natural. Any mother would do that for her girl. My parents disowned me. It says the parents told to the soldiers that go take him away to jail. We have absolutely no connection with this person. Till 20 years back, maybe, I have read such notices given in newspapers that so and so is not related to us anymore. If he has taken loans or anything, it is not our responsibility. You might remember also. And not only that, he feels sorry. You remember the Marathi play Ekach Pyar? Similarly, he says that I decide, okay, it's only today that I will play one game. And there he goes. And he loses, and then everything happens. That is fine. Whether it is dice, whether it is playing cards, whether it is horse racing, drugs, drinks, all addictions are bad. We know it. But what he says in the end is most important. He says, Kavasha Ilusha tells you, and this is an advice which has come from within. It has come from his own heart. It has come from his own experience. And that is why it is important. It's not like sitting at the table and preaching, He has suffered. And therefore he says, Akshair ma divya, Krushimit Krushasva, Vitte Ramasva, Bahumanyamana. You can understand some words, right? RigVeda is not difficult to understand. So, Akshayhi ma divyaha. Don't gamble with these aksha, those dices. Krushim it krushasva. Please go get up to the fields and start farming. The last line is very important even for you and me. Vitte ramasva. Be happy with the money. Bahumanyamana. Thinking that this is more than what I want. What is the need? Where is the need of doing 700 crore, 1000, whatever? That money laundering and scams. Where is the need? So don't do that. Vitte ramasva bahumanyamanaha. And for this, I think that these, like many other suktas in RigVeda, this has become universal. It is beyond space and time. Even after 6,000 years, it is still alive and it still applies to you, me, people in America, people in Africa, in China, everywhere. And that is the beauty of RigVeda. That the RigVeda suttas have never become redundant, They are alive, they are useful, they are relevant even today, and they will be so later on too. I talked about so many aspects. I tried to cover as much as I could. But please remember that Rigvedic people were not only philosophers or only cultural or family people or something of the sort. They also were science oriented. How so? I told you about that Ayasi Janga. When you make something out of iron, you have to first mine that, then you have to purify that, then you have to make an alloy, then you have to forge it, right? So just see the process. They always talk about Ratha and they talk about Ratha Chakra, right? To make that Ara and Nemi and axle and everything, it takes a lot of scientific knowledge of metallurgy and other things also, and forging also. So just imagine what their knowledge was. They, of course, knew many other sciences because I told you, Ashwini, they talk about medicine. And when they talk about medicine, they must be having some kind of aushadha. By the way, the word aushadha is very nice. Nowadays, people have, there is a fashion that, oh, I use only herbal medicine. But aushadha itself means herbal. Okay? Oshadhi is vanaspati, and aushadha is something which is made from vanaspati and not by any chemical process. So they must have some aushadha with them, and or there is a reference, that Rishi Atri, he fell down in fire. Ashwini not only pulled him up, cured him, but the moment they pulled him up, they gave him some drink so that his energy will come back. And now we say, oh, he's on saline. I mean, I'm not saying he was on saline there, but they knew of tonics, they knew of asas, they knew of aushadas. These references you do find in, so medicine was also quite advanced in Rigvedic times. But the feather in the cap of Rigvedic scientific knowledge is astronomy. You just cannot believe this. But like I said, people don't want to believe, but I can give you references. I have Rigved Samhita here. I can give you references from the text. It was in 1994 that I first went to US to teach, okay, in Macalester College. And that day there was a solar eclipse, and somebody said, if you don't have a class, go to the amphitheater and they are going to show a documentary on solar eclipse. I said, okay, I'll go. I had nothing else to do. In that documentary, I was the only Indian, all white Americans. A big screen, and the first shot was a rising sun. You must have seen that in Nat Geo and all. We see that nowadays. In those days, it was a rare thing for me. And I saw that rising sun. And the first sentence the narrator uttered was the first ever reference to a solar eclipse is found in an ancient Indian text called RigVeda. Can you imagine what happened to me? Even today, I get goosebumps. It is really, I was happy, I was proud, and I was crying. I was happy because these people knew and they mentioned it. And I was sorry also. I felt bad also. I said, Americans know this, at least some Americans know this. How many my countrymen, my fellow countrymen know this? And then I decided that no, I must spread whatever knowledge I have, whatever little knowledge I have to every Indian. I mean, not every Indian, but as many as possible. But yes, in the fifth mandala, I mentioned this Atri just now, he mentions solar eclipse and doesn't say Rahu came and ate him and anything of the sort. Suryam tamasa vivyadha. Then Surya was hurt or covered by tamas, that is shadow, darkness. And there is, of course, other references also, but these people knew this. And it is, I told you about Vivaha Sukta also, that it's an astronomical event, which is they have metaphorically converted into a wedding ceremony and added some other cultural things also. They knew so much astronomy, and we still don't know how. Did they have telescopes? Did they have any computational methods? How could they know so much? They knew that the entire universe is heliocentric, not geocentric as the West thought till 14th century. We knew that thousands of years ago. So much so, I told you that they know that moon only gets the reflected light of the sun, the light which is reflected from the earth to the moon. right? So they knew that. One Rishi is talking to his friend and he has some, what should I say, queries. And one of the queries is, oh friend, tell me, when we are sleeping, when it is night in this country, Katamam dishi rashmi rasya tatana. In which direction does the ray of the sun go? So they don't think that the sun disappears. They know that the sun goes somewhere else and gives his sunlight. Can you believe that? They have different types of, what should I say, time measuring. For example, I mean, Tithi and all, I won't talk into about that. But they know mass. We use the word masa, but we don't know what the word means. Ma is moon, like Chandrama, Purnima. So Ma is moon. And Masa is lunar month. Okay. At the same time, they also used to have solar month. Okay. And therefore, to find out, they knew, they calculated that every third year there will be an additional lunar month to balance the whole system. And therefore, they have the reference to Marimlucha, that is the 13th additional month in Rigveda. Do you believe that? I mean, even today, people don't know the significance of 13th month, right? And then we just use it like Dushkala Terava Mahina and all such things. But why Terava Mahina? Why this 13th month? Rigvedic people knew that, but unfortunately we did not. And there were so many calendars available there. Vatsara, Samvatsara, Idavatsara, Parivatsara. These are all the names which are given and mentioned there. There used to be yajnas. Let's say Ashwamedha, not exactly in Rigveda, but Vedic times. Ashwamedha, the main ahuti is offered on Chaitri Purnima. Or some Purnima, Chaitri Purnima, I think. Exactly 1 year before that, on the previous Chaitri Purnima, you do the Sankalpa, and then every Amavasya and Purnima, you have to perform different yajnas and this and that. How did they calculate when would the next Chaitri Purnima will come? How did they know that? Can you believe? Imagine that. I can't. There must have been some system. There must have. Unfortunately, a lot of our heritage and cultural treasure was purposely destroyed by foreign aggressions, and we have lost so much. But whatever is remaining, let us make the most of it. This is what I want to tell you. So these are some of the things, which are amazing. I must say that I haven't told you everything about Rigveda. I'm aware of that, but time constraint, and since this is only an introduction to Rigveda, I will stop here. But not before I tell you how the greatness, importance, and significance of Rigveda is acknowledged all over the world. I'm not talking about the different editions and the German scholars and all that. But I'll tell you one thing. Just now I told you that Rigveda was not written when it was composed. It was written in Hastalikhita manuscript forms much later. And when it was not written, it was handed down from Guru to Shishya by what we call oral tradition or Maukhika Parampara. Even today, if you go to any Ved Pathshala, maybe they will have something in front of them, but it is actually Guru who keeps telling them the accent and everything, and the students learn, the Shishyas learn. This Maukhika Parampara is foolproof. It is like uh, the classical Indian music, sare, rega, gama, and this is not the only thing. It is sare, ga, ga, re, sa. So there are, it is called, you might have heard this. First, Samhita, Pada, Krama, Jata, Ghana, Rekha. There are 10 different types in which you have to say one Ruk, and therefore, in Rigveda, there is not a single example of what we call variant reading. That, oh, in this edition it said Surya, but in this edition it said Surah. No, there is no such thing at all. In 1991, UNESCO declared the World Oral Heritage. And who do you think? What do you think got the first number? Rigvedic Maukik Parampara. See, we don't know this. We really don't know this, and I feel sorry. So, when you hear this talk, spread this to as many people as possible. The first ever, what should I say, poem recorded on the gramophone. Graham Bell came from US to Europe, and he said, I have made a machine, and whatever somebody says, I can play it later on exactly the same way. So all the scientists and the great people from the society gathered together, and Max Muller was one of them. He asked Max Muller to say something. Max Muller got up and said something. After lunch, Graham Bell played that on his gramophone, and everybody was surprised. Then Max Miller asked the scientists, do you know what I said just now? They said, no, 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 it was all Greek and Latin to us. He said, it was neither Greek, it was neither Latin, it was Sanskrit. I have said, Agni Mile Purohitam Yajnasya Deva. What a person. So when he had to make a world record, he took refuge to Rigveda. He thought that this was the best thing he could say. I mean, there are so many other things. I will not again go into details, but if you by now you must have understood how Rigveda as a text, as a culture, as a religion, philosophy, science, history, even geography. I did not mention geography, but there are descriptions of Dasharanya war where rivers, mountains, and areas are mentioned. But everything you get together, sociology, anthropology, you name it, and it is there in Rigveda. And that is why I would say that if you want to say or describe Rigveda in one word, I would say it is our Gangotri. धन्यवाद.